I'm now prepared to rule on the question of privilege raised on April 7, 2017 by the Honourable Member for Perth Wellington, in which he asks that the matter of privilege under debate on April 6, 2017, which was superseded by the adoption of a motion to proceed to orders of the day, be revived.
I'd like to thank the member for Perth Wellington for having raised the matter in the House, as well as the Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader, the House Leader of the Opposition, and the members for Belleuil-Chambly, Lanark, Frontenac, Kingston, Sarnia, Lambton, Banff, Airdrie, Calgary, Signal Hill, and York Simcoe for their contributions to the discussion on this important matter and unprecedented circumstance.
Presenting his case, the member for Perth Wellington acknowledged that a motion to proceed to orders of the day while the House is considering a matter of privilege is procedurally in order. On this point, he and the Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader agree. The Chair also agrees that the motion as moved was in order, and this is supported by numerous authorities. Rather, it is on the issue of whether and how such a matter of privilege can be revived that the member for Perth Wellington focused his argument. He pointed out that other types of proceedings, like the consideration of motions of instruction to committees or motions to concur in a committee report, can be considered again once a motion to proceed to orders of the day has been adopted. He argued that allowing such a motion to permanently end further consideration of something as important as a question of privilege would create a dangerous precedent. He asked the Chair to effectively restart the proceedings on the question of privilege by again finding a prima facie case of privilege on the matter relating to the free movement of members in the parliamentary precinct as originally raised by the member for Milton.
The problem facing the Chair, then, is determining first whether it is procedurally in order to revive a matter of privilege that has been superseded, and second, in the affirmative, how could that be done in a procedurally acceptable manner?
To proceed to orders of the day is adopted when the House is considering a motion of instruction or a motion to concur in a committee report. The motion is also dropped from the order paper. However, members who wish to revive the matter can again give the required 48 hours notice of the same motion and then move it in the House. As the member for Perth Wellington correctly stated, this means that, quote, one is back where one began and can reinitiate the same identical proceeding in the usual fashion appropriate to that class of motion, unquote. These arguments are persuasive, and accordingly the Chair must conclude that it is procedurally possible to revive a matter of privilege that has been likewise superseded.
Having answered the first question in the affirmative, the next question for the Chair is determining how this ought to be done. The member for Perth Wellington and others argue that this is properly done by raising the matter in the House and having the Speaker again give priority consideration to it.
À la Chambre, et que le Président décide encore une fois de lui donner priorité. As a consequence of the events of April 6th, the Chair can see a few other ways the matter of privilege could be revived. The member for Milton, or any other member for that matter, could seek to revive the question by way of written notice on the notice paper. As House of Commons Procedure and Practice 2nd edition states at page 154, such a notice of motion, unless it were proposed by a minister, would be, quote, placed on the order paper under the list of private members' business items outside the order of precedence following the 48 hours notice period, unquote. The matter could also be brought before the House as an opposition motion. Malgré cela,
however, the situation in which the House finds itself is unprecedented. The Chair can find no instance of debate on a matter of privilege superseded by the adoption of a motion to proceed to orders of the day. At the same time, the Speaker has a duty to uphold the fundamental rights and privileges of the House and of its members. That's why, when questions of privilege are raised, the Speaker has to decide whether prima facie they ought to have immediate priority consideration.
Priorité. Si la question de
If a superseded matter of privilege were brought forward again as the subject of an opposition day, the chair would not likely interfere unless the motion was found to be defective in some way.
entaché d'un vice pour une raison ou une autre. If a superseded matter of privilege were put down for debate via the notice paper, it could also eventually proceed pursuant to the procedures applicable to government or private members' business, as the case may be. However, as is stated in O'Brien and Bosk at page 154, the member in whose name the item stands has another option and, quote, may decide to seek priority in debate for the motion, e.g. if new information were to come to light. The member must then seek to convince the Speaker that the matter raised in the motion should be considered a prima facie question of privilege, unquote. This, in a sense, is a third manner in which a matter of privilege can be revived, and it is for all practical purposes the same method that the member for Perth Wellington is advocating. Given the unprecedented nature of this circumstance, and given the weight of procedural jurisprudence, the Chair is inclined to conclude that there are sufficient grounds for allowing the matter of privilege superseded on April 6th to be revived in the manner proposed by the member for Perth Wellington. Accordingly, without restating my ruling of April 6th in the matter of delayed access to the parliamentary precinct, I again find a prima facie question of privilege. I now invite the member for Perth Wellington to move the appropriate motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move, seconded by the Honourable Member for Haliburton, Kawartha Lakes Brock, that the question of privilege regarding the free movement of members of Parliament within the parliamentary precinct raised on Wednesday, March 22nd, 2017, be referred to the Standing Committee on Procedure and House Affairs.
Hear, hear.
Mr. Nater, seconded by Mr. Schmale, moved that the question of privilege regarding the free movement of members of Parliament within the parliamentary precinct raised on Wednesday, March 22, 2017, be referred to the Standing Committee on Procedure and House Affairs. Debate. The Honourable Member for Perth Wellington.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let me begin by saying that your ruling today is truly a testament to your position as Speaker and to the Speakers who've gone before you. Truly, the role of the Speaker is one of the utmost principle in our parliamentary democracy, and I think today, in the long line of Speakers who have gone before you, have found the appropriate ruling. After all, Mr. Speaker, often the role of the Speaker is determined to be one of a referee, and we often hear that referred to in tour groups and among university lecturers. However, the role of the Speaker is so much more than that. The Speaker is truly the defender of the rights and privileges of this place. I am reminded from time to time of the words of a great English speaker, William Lenthal, who said in his place, in his time, when met with the King, King Charles I, he said with great conviction to the King, to the executive of the day, "I have neither eyes to see nor tongue to speak, except as this House directs me, whose servant I am." And today the Speaker made such a ruling and stood up to the face of opposition from the government ministers. Let me begin by saying in my remarks that I will be spending my time today with the Honourable Member for Battle River Crowfoot. I want to say it is, in a way, unfortunate that we have to have a redo of this debate. This debate was properly started last week when the Speaker did rightly find a prima facie case of privilege. And it is troubling for two manners. First, the nature of the incident itself. Two members of Parliament were prevented from undertaking their duties of voting in this House. And second, by the unfortunate actions that were undertaken by the government in preventing this matter from coming to a vote. As the Speaker rightly found in his ruling, this is unprecedented. Never before in the history of this place has a matter of privilege been dealt with in such a way. Never before in this place has the government shut down and prevented all 338 members of this House from voting on a matter of the privileges of us as parliamentarians. Every other case of privilege has been dealt with one way or another through a vote, either in the affirmative or in the negative, but not in this case. This, Madam Speaker, is most unfortunate. And it's unfortunate for so many reasons. If, as members in this House have noted before, they are allowed to proceed in this manner on this case, how many times going forward will votes on questions of privilege be prevented from coming to a vote in this House by the duly elected members of this House? I want to say as well, Madam Speaker, the great respect that I have for this institution and for those who serve this institution. And I want to say as well, specifically, for the Parliamentary Protective Service, who I have the utmost of confidence in for defending us and for keeping us as parliamentarians safe. In my short time as a parliamentarian, I've only been elected for about a year and a half, I've always felt safe in the exercising of my duties here in this place. And indeed, Madam Speaker, another speaker in last week's debate quoted from the back of our ID badges. And I think it's worthwhile to reread that into the record. Under the law of parliamentary privilege, the bearer has free and open access at all times without obstruction or interference to the precincts of the House of Parliament of which the bearer is a member. And in fact, the law of parliamentary privilege is enshrined constitutionally in Section 18 of the Constitution Act 1867, also more commonly known to as its original title, the British North America Act 1867. Let us remember exactly what took place on Budget Day. 2 members of Parliament, at least. We know of at least 2. There could have been others as well. There was indication from the original speaker's ruling that there were others potentially on the buses that were also denied access. But at least 2 members, the members from Milton and Beauce, were unable to attend a vote in this House, in this place. And the outcome of that particular vote is not relevant. The fact is they were prevented from doing their duties. The duties that they, as elected members of this place, are entrusted to do so on behalf of their constituents. All of us have that duty. To the constituents we are honored and privileged to represent. Let's imagine for just a moment how this could have played out differently. Imagine had there been a vote of confidence and members were prevented by one way or another from attending this place to vote. Now, certainly in this case, there's a majority government, and 1 or 2 members not exercising their vote may not seem like a significant matter. Let's think back into the not-so-distant past. 2005, May of 2005. There was a budget vote, a confidence vote in this very House. The Paul Martin Liberals were on the ropes. It looked like they could be defeated. A couple lucky floor crossings and the support of an independent member of Parliament meant that it ended up in a tie vote. And Mr. Speaker Milliken at the time was forced into the position of breaking that tie vote in the affirmative. One vote, Madam Speaker, would have made the difference in that case of an election and the dissolution of Parliament or the continuation of that government. One vote, Madam Speaker. In fact, in this Parliament, not too long ago, on Bill C-10, on a Monday morning, actually it was a Monday afternoon by the time we voted, we had a tie vote. We had a tie vote in this House on a piece of government legislation. One vote would have made the difference between that piece of legislation moving on to third reading and that vote and that piece of legislation being defeated in this place. The Speaker at the time was forced to once again break a tie. Interestingly, in a majority government, that does not happen very often. It happened in that case. I would point out it's somewhat ironic that the government is currently proposing changes. One of the changes they've mentioned is perhaps sitting earlier in the morning. But if we use the example of Bill C-10, That vote was at the early afternoon, so I'd be surprised how many members may be in this House at that time. So we're forced with the question now of where do we go from here? Where do we move forward in the appropriate manner? As my motion clearly states, it is appropriate at this point that the bill or that the matter be referred to the Standing Committee on Procedure and House Affairs, as is the appropriate location. Now, I know there have been flimsy procedural efforts for the committee to self-direct their own study, to undertake its own study of privilege, but as we know, the standing orders clearly state that matters of privilege do not fall under the mandate of the Procedure and House Affairs Committee, and it falls on the House to direct the appropriate committee to undertake a study of the privilege. After all, Madam Speaker, the rights and privileges of this House are a matter for this House to undertake. I do feel a little bit like Bill Murray in the movie Groundhog Day, that we are redoing again and again the same battle, the same debate that has been undertaken. I've been told I'm better looking than Bill Murray. I'm not so sure about that, but I will say this. It is unfortunate that on a matter as important as the privileges of this House, a procedurally flimsy effort by this government, to shut down the debate is truly, truly unfortunate. 2 members were denied the right to vote, and now, by their efforts, the attempt was to deny 338 members the right to vote. That is truly unfortunate. And it's unfortunate that it's being done at the same time that the Procedure and House Affairs Committee is undertaking a standing order change, a change that would be done so unilaterally without the support of opposition parties. The government states that they want to have a discussion on the matter. A discussion can only happen if both sides are both listening and discussing. Madam Speaker, the privileges of this House are of the utmost importance to each and every member of this House. It is not a matter for the government to decide. Rather, it is a matter for this House to decide by way of the vote. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Questions and comments, questions et commentaires. L'honorable député de Sherbrooke.
The honourable member for Sherbrooke. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I think this is an historic opportunity in this House, and we've seen that the Speaker ruled favorably on a question of privilege, and I think particularly for the member for Brossard-Saint-Lambert, who put forward a motion to return to the orders of the day, the Speaker ruled on that earlier as being inappropriate under the circumstances. We were debating a question of privilege, and we should have gone to the end of that debate and had a vote on it. The debate was actually cut off by my government colleague's motion. So I would like to have my colleague's opinion on the historic nature of this Speaker's ruling. When the Speaker ruled that the end of the debate caused by the government last week was inappropriate. And I'd like him to comment on the precedent that this sets for future rulings.
Wellington?
Oui, merci, Madame la Présidente.
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker, and I'd like to thank my colleague for Sherbrooke for his question. Yes, indeed. This is the first time in the history of this Parliament that the government had put an end to an important debate on a question of privilege in this House. There was no vote. This is the first time in the history of this House that there was no vote on a question of privilege.
Has the government shut down the opportunity to actually have a vote on a matter of privilege that is before it? Never before. This is parliamentary history, Madam Speaker, without precedent. Every other precedent in the case of O'Brien and Boss has been clearly delineated to have been a matter that has been dealt with by the House. This has not been the case, and it is truly unfortunate that such heavy-handed tactics would be employed by the government on such an important matter of privilege.
Questions and comments? Then the honourable member for Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I thank my colleague for his excellent speech. He and I are both graduates of the same public affairs program at Carleton, and it's a good place to go if you want to learn all about parliamentary procedure. I want to just ask the member to highlight the importance of the fight that we're undertaking on behalf of parliamentary democracy. This is really about responsible government. It's about the fact that the executive must be accountable to the legislature, and the legislature has certain rights that the executive cannot trample on. This is a big and consequential fight for the way in which our democracy works. And these procedural points all inform that broader issue. So the member could comment on that and speak to the fact that Canadians are very concerned about this and are writing to us about these issues.
The honourable member for Perth Wellington.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to thank my current colleague and former classmate for his important question, and he's right. The issue before us is one where the government is ramming down procedural changes to the standing orders of this House without the consent of the opposition. In every major case, and as the practice of this House, is these changes are made by consensus, by the agreement of all political parties. This House does not belong to the executive branch. This House belongs to the legislative branch, to us as parliamentarians, to each and every one of us, for us to decide how we govern ourselves within this place, not to be told how to govern ourselves by the executive branch. Madam Speaker, I will continue to oppose the one-sided unilateral efforts by the government in the standing order standoff. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
We have time for a very brief question. Questions et commentaires. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader, a brief question.
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm wondering if the member across the way can assist me in better understanding what he believes his constituents would want. I believe my constituents are in favour of modernising Parliament. Does he believe his constituents are in favour of modernising Parliament?
A brief answer from the member from Perth Wellington.
Madam Speaker, we as Canadians and we as members of this House have to undertake our duties to this place, and their duties should not be done by unilaterally ramming down changes. Let us get to the real work by having a real discussion in the Procedure and House Affairs Committee, not by having it one-sided with a guillotine motion that's directing the committee to report back by a certain date without the consensus of the opposition parties. Thank you, Madam Speaker.